When we think of traditional hospitality or luxury, we think about sort of rarity or cost of product.
Yeah.
And I will always associate with certain brands or hotels or businesses that perhaps have the most gold leaf or the largest suites. My background in hotels, I've always worked for properties where the service has been key.
Do you find luxury in the wrapper of a Fortnum & Mason's chocolate set? In a Lamborghini at a Dubai shopping centre? At a decadent brasserie with oysters and foie gras? On the week of the Platinum Jubilee, we ask, what is modern luxury? And does modern luxury even make sense? Mark Surguy is the general manager of the Haymarket Hotel from Firmdale Hotels, which delivers luxury in its most contemporary expression to tens of thousands of guests per year in locations across London and New York. He has learned to navigate those tricky philosophical questions, all while building a staff and a machine capable of delivering that luxury. That's no mean feat. I was curious to understand not only his thoughts on the moment, but how he achieved those things from the point of view of operations. What do I have to do to pull off modern luxury in my venue?
Traditional luxury, to me, is that service element. And very early on in my career, I learned sort of the theory of genuine hospitality, where we treat our customers as guests.
Yeah.
And it's a very ancient trade. It's certainly evolved since then. I think Coco Chanel sort of hit the nail on the head when she said, luxury must be comfortable, otherwise it's not luxury. Where I am now in Firmdale, we say hotels should be a living thing. So you have a sense of belonging, you have a place, you have a home, and it feels right, it feels comfortable.
So when we had Tom from Pizza Pilgrims here, and obviously Pizza Pilgrims is not a luxury pizza chain, although I suppose in some ways it's luxury. But he was saying, well, the ethos is be yourself, right? And he was talking about removing a highly formulated process from the way that the waiters did service, maybe toying with the idea of getting rid of the uniform, coming them in as dressed as themselves. And one of the things that kind of gets at is like a fundamental level of equality between the guest and the server, the waiter.
Yeah.
When I think of what is old-fashioned about luxury, that's, if there's a kind of excessive deference and kind of process that is, do you think that's something that's going out of fashion?
I think there's always going to be a place for it, but it's changing, isn't it? I like to sort of use the term informal formality. So in the environments where I work, they are still relatively traditional, and you have a high level of service. But also, personality is so important. You don't want that sort of butler-style service. You want your team members to be guest-centric, but also show personality, get to know the guest, kind of invest in each other, and you build a stronger relationship that way, I think.
Yeah.
And it comes back to that feeling of the guest, that feel of comfort, that feel of home, that feel of belonging. I think if you've got quite a formal style of service, are you going to be comfortable in that environment?
You built, or are you looking at building, because you've just started there, are you looking at building personality into the expression of luxury at Firmdale? Is that something that's kind of entered your...
Yeah, I think that's a big part of the brand. So it's developing that at every stage of the guest journey. So, the guest journey is from that moment where the room is booked, or even prior to that, through to departure and post-departure. And at every touch point, we should be demonstrating personality.
So give me an example. How does that personality express itself?
I think the welcome is so important in a hospitality setting.
Yeah.
So creating that immediate sense of arrival, that immediate sense that the guest has made the right decision in joining this property, staying at this property.
Right.
I think it starts with the recruitment. So we will recruit will and train the skill. So the vast majority of the team members that join us are in lower positions where the skill level can be trained. You don't need that on day one.
Yeah.
But what you do need is the guest-centric attitude and the will. So the system is in place to define that. We make sure we're second interviewing, senior managers are interviewing, so we understand the culture of the individuals and they fit kind of the family that we're building.
Okay. And you hire for a kind of value fit with the organisation. Some employers go, we want to hire diversely, and we want to hire people with a different perception. But you're going, no, we want to actually create a family of people who are like-minded.
Like-minded and a guest-centric attitude.
Okay.
Obviously, diversity is really important, isn't it, in terms of to bring different experiences to the table and
Sure.
But certainly that fundamental, I'm here for the guests, is a guest-centric.
Yeah.
I want to be here, I want to deliver great service. That's a great starting point. It's changing the way we think about our roles. So rather than thinking, I clean a room, it's having that attitude, well, I'm delivering brilliant experiences. Christopher Wren, when he was building St Paul's Cathedral, has the analogy, true or not, but he asked a worker, what are you doing? And the worker says, I'm cutting stone. The next person he asks says, I'm building a wall. And then the third person he asks says, well, I'm building a beautiful cathedral. And it's getting that buy-in from the team and that understanding that we're all doing something.
And how do you, so if I'm sat there and I'm thinking, well, I want to create a sense of a belief in the excellence of the work that we're doing across my team. Other than, so I've hired people who have propensity to do that anyway. Is there something in the way that I actually manage and run the team that will help me do that?
I think creating a clear and narrow set of objectives. Mm-hmm. So you're communicating very clearly on where you're going, where you want to go, how you're going to get there.
Yeah.
If you've got a large number of objectives that are shooting in various ways, it's probably going to get lost. The messaging is going to get lost. But if you have that narrow set of objectives, a clear goal, a clear vision, and you can regularly communicate that to the team. Yeah. And you've built great relationships and you develop trust with them. I think you're halfway there.
Is it a long game? Is it's something where it suits kind of long staff and manager tenures?
I think you're always going to have a mix. Hospitality is known for relatively high labour turnover, so that's always a battle for us. Retention is always a battle for us, and we work very hard on that, and that is going to be a key part of your service delivery. Yeah. If you're changing your team every few months, clearly you're going to not have that consistency.
This is Served With podcast, and one luxury experience I enjoy is listening to hospitality podcasts from a sun lounger. You won't want to interrupt your luxury experience abroad by searching for this podcast, so I recommend that if you haven't already, you subscribe immediately. Back to the show.
So I think modern luxury has evolved even further in the last few years, and we've seen a real focus on experiential resorts, hotels. I was doing a small bit of research and I stumbled across Nihi, which is a resort on the island of Sumba in Indonesia.
Yeah. Is it spelled Nihi?
Yeah, Nihi.
Okay.
Strapline is edge of wildness. And they're all about the experience you can have. So yes, you're staying in a hotel, but it's more than that. And they've gone the next stage and really, I think, appealing to the millennials and the new markets. It's a return to life well lived, they say. Rugged luxury meets unregulated freedom. Indigo is a brand of Intercontinental Hotel Group, and they've launched this brand in the last few years, which again taps into this experiential sort of theory. Tagline being unlock our story. So although they're a brand, they go for this individuality in properties. They employ team members that live and breathe the local area and are experts in that.
Okay. And is that where? So when you say experience, that's what you mean is that it's less of a kind of standalone rinse and repeat. Here's a hotel. Yeah. We could take this. We could put it anywhere. It'd still be the same hotel. It is something that they grow out of the.
That's certainly something that's developing a really clear trend, I think, and what although it might be not the top end of the market, Nihi is very much the top end of the market. Yeah. This is sort of a 4-star market, but nonetheless, it is a luxurious product, and it's all built around local, live and breathe local, that experience. There's another business that's taken it a step further, which is fascinating, and it's called the 3 Arts Club in Chicago. Yeah. And they're seriously moving the goalposts. What they have is they're reimagining the relationship between home and retail, home and hospitality, and residential. So in essence, they're a hospitality product. They're restaurants and bars, but everything is available to buy. So you kind of experience, you live and breathe it, you experience it, and then you'll purchase elements of your experience. Which
Wow, that's, I don't know. I'm not sure I like that.
I suppose you're having a Negroni and then I quite like that lamp. Shall we?
It's very much kind of commercializing, or getting commerciality right into the center of every experience that you're having. Right? It's like.
But I suppose they would argue that they're delivering this experience that is modern luxury. It's what people are looking for. That convenience, that sort of bit of storytelling.
This is Served With podcast, and if you squirm at the idea of the consumerism in the 3 Arts Club experience, let me debase this podcast for you by pointing out that it is a B2B marketing exercise. I don't think you would, but if you wanted to, you could buy anything you want in this episode, including this table, the sofa, the merchandise we sometimes wear. But the only thing you really cannot buy is the look of delight on your guest's face as they see that it is possible to pay via mobile without having to flag down a waiter.
I think fine dining is a really good example of the evolution of luxury. Actually, I think, we had sort of 30 years ago, we had the 1980s where you had that sort of nouveau cuisine, which was these small plates and much more fancy and refined ways of cooking. And then there was sort of a rally against that where things became a bit more robust. And then we moved into this era of tasting menus. I don't know if you've experienced, a 6-course, 10-course, 12-course.
Had a tasting menu.
They can be, I think I've gone up to 12 courses is my max. That's dining over a number of hours. In this particular experience, there was a water sommelier, so there was a sommelier for water, and would pair each course with a particular water. Small plates, but it filled you up. Yeah. And I think again we've got past that, and a lot of fine dining now are throwing away the tablecloths, and they're cooking simpler food. Don't get me wrong, the beef you eat on the plate will be. The chef will know the field it came from, and the farmer and all of that stuff. It's still an incredibly luxurious product, ingredient, but it's much simpler. And I think that kind of shares the general societal change.
Have the group of people going to luxury hotels changed?
Yeah, I'd say so. In London, in the properties that I've worked on in London, about half the guests from the US, and they certainly have. As a general rule, they bring quite a more informal culture with them.
But would maybe quite charmed by the idea of a certain version of Englishness.
Absolutely, yeah.
So although they bring informality with them, they're actually shopping for formality.
You often have that expression, that quintessential British hospitality or English hospitality. You often see that written.
Yeah.
It's a very common sort of marketing tool for a lot of properties in London.
Yeah, I bet.
And what does it mean? There is British hospitality for sure, in our product, in our service. But
what does it mean? What is British about it?
It's a very good question. There is a difference between that British service delivery as opposed to an American service delivery or a German service delivery.
Well, I was thinking of French was the nation in my head, right?
Yeah, you tend to have the top hotel schools are Swiss.
Yeah.
As a general rule, and you certainly look at them for that process-led, standards-led service, which of course plays a part. The Italian, to use sort of the sporting context. When you're keeping score, you play differently, don't you?
Sure.
So that basis of process measuring it is vital, and we wouldn't do what we did without it. But then I suppose you need that genuine hospitality on top. You need that spontaneous generosity, that engagement, all those lovely things that actually take an experience from being process-led to being wonderful and memorable.
And the difficult thing about creating something from scratch isn't that it is worse than that the conception of it is worse than a kind of the 5-star process we know. It's that it actually takes time and trial and error to cultivate. The process is sophisticated. It's like this is what 5-star means.
We've been doing it for 100 years, or
Yeah,
whatever it might be.
Exactly, and you've got to be really good to build something from scratch that's as good as what came before it.
Agreed.
1 in a million.
That was Served With Podcast, and you've been listening to Mark Surguy, the GM of the Haymarket Hotel from the Firmdale Hotel Group, as he thinks about modern luxury. I want to return to that point about having to be really good to replace what came before it, because I think that's at the beating heart of why operators are rightly very sceptical of technology vendors like ourselves. At Stalkit, there's an operations first mentality, which I think is missing from some tech companies I could name. That means that the most important person in the company is Ivo. He is our head of customer success. Ivo used to run a hummus restaurant called the Hummus Brothers, and his job is to take the operational difficulties, the challenges, the headaches of restaurateurs, and to tell the product team what to do. Ivo is one reason that we're rated 4.8 stars on Google and a nice round 5 on Capterra. Finally, if you enjoyed this episode, I would pair it with our wine episode featuring Albert Blaze. Albert Blaze was the sommelier for the Cove Club before turning independent. He's talking about how to build out a wine list in a casual dining establishment. What I think is really great about Albert is that he's very open and unpretentious and takes wine communication seriously, because whatever else modern luxury is, it ought to make you feel great.